Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Let us sit quietly a few moments and meditate on the Supreme Spirit in any way we please. Om Bhadrang Karnebhi Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangayestuštuvagam sastanubhi Yashema Devahitayadayuhu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we hear with our ears what is auspicious. May we see with our eyes what is auspicious. May we enjoy with strong limbs and bodies the life allotted to us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us all. Same-sightedness, the one within the many. That is one aspect that is most difficult to understand. Again and again, the various scriptures say, the Gita, the Upanishads say, one should try to see the same reality everywhere. That spirit, that sameness, same-sightedness is constantly emphasized. And the question is, what is it? You're supposed to be able to see the same reality everywhere, but what is that reality that you're supposed to be able to see? So you can take it in several different ways. In one way, you can say, well, I can examine everything and see what is the same in everything that I see, everything that is around. What is it that is the similar? What is the same? And science has gloriously gone ahead and investigated that. And they find, indeed, there are many things that are the same. In fact, as all physical objects all have the same character in terms of atoms and protons, electrons, neutrons, and all sorts of smaller, subtler particles that have been discovered. So everything that we see, all physical objects anyway, you can see the same thing in all of them. Or you can use instruments to try to analyze them all, and you'll find a basic sameness in all material objects. That much science has been able to do, and it is a glorious result indeed. It has taken thousands of years. Even the Greeks in the ancient days talked about atoms as being fundamental constituents, although what they meant by an atom was something different. But nevertheless, trying to see some similarity, some consistency, make sense out of things. You can make sense out of things by seeing relationships. Otherwise, whatever you do, if there's no relationship between one thing and another, everything becomes totally arbitrary and totally puzzling. So the idea since those ancient days, thousands of years ago, even on the material plane, has been to try to discover that relationship that exists among all objects. Relationship in a limited way, you can tell there's a family, there are parents and children, and their relationships of one thing or another, that you can see. But to make an overall picture, to make sense of the whole universe in a physical way, one wants to establish that fundamental reality that is common to all objects. And that has been, is still being carried on. It's not ended. They have not found that one thing out of which everything is made, because that one thing, whenever they find it, turns out to be made up of other things, parts which then have to be related to each other. Anyway, it has come down to a very subtle level. And probably it cannot, in all practical senses, be taken to any more subtle level than physics has been able to reach at this point with their not only atoms and not only molecules, but atoms and electrons, protons, neutrons. Now, all those things are found to have parts called quarks, not quirk, but quarks. And there's not only just one quark. There are many, there are at least 8 different kinds of quarks. Now, what these are made of is, that will be the next question, and people are trying to answer that. But some of them are, or maybe at this point, all the fundamental ones that have been discovered are thought to be indivisible. That is, that was the idea of an atom. Initially, an atom was supposed to be an entity that is indivisible, that everything is made up of certain entities which are indivisible. Anyway, so on the physical plane, a certain amount of success has been attained. But then if you bring psychology into it, yes, human beings are very similar psychologically in so many different ways. And they share certain characteristics with animals also. You can recognize the behavior of some animals. You can easily see, yes, I can understand why this animal is doing that. You can empathize with them. So the question is always relationship, fundamental identity, or identity at some level. But to see identity everywhere, in all respects, the physical plane doesn't seem to be able to supply a definite answer. It reaches out to it, but it can't ever be said to have actually attained it. And psychologically, yes, there's a certain, definitely a sameness of characteristics, but there's also a vast difference among different people, and certainly you can see among animals a certain characteristic psychologically. Yes, you do a certain thing, the dog acts in a certain way, you can understand why the dog acts that way. There's a relationship there, but still it's always conditioned, it's always limited, and it seems to be, we seem to be approaching the end of our possibilities without really having reached that goal of what is it that is the same, that is the fundamental reality that underlies everything. So the solution seems to be we have to go to the spiritual level. At the physical and at the psychological level, we seem to get to a certain point, and then we cannot get any farther. But the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita, they insist that sameness is the basic rule of the universe. That there is a sameness, that everything is really a manifestation of one reality, and that one reality is the fundamental truth of everything. Again and again, that is emphasized. And that is the sort of question that we're asking. What is that same-sightedness that is talked about? And what relationship does it have to our practical life? Does it make any difference, or is it simply a theoretical recognition? Yes, you can see that same element, just like if you have a fine meal in front of you, you can discriminate and say, well, yes, these are just atoms and molecules, and I know what they are made of. But that doesn't help you at all. You're hungry, you want that nourishment from the food. Whether it is atoms and molecules or not is not the germane issue at that point. It has another function to perform. So, at what level can we say that this is to be understood? This same-sightedness which is talked about in the scriptures, in the Upanishads and in the Bhagavad Gita. So I want to start by quoting some of these verses, which, if you really think about them, are very startling. I mean, these are statements made by those people who understood the fundamental reality of everything, in the sense that they had reached that entity, Brahman, or the presence of God, or however you want to phrase it. They had reached that entity which they saw. They didn't speculate. They actually saw that this was the fundamental reality, the fundamental constituency of everything. They saw it to be so. And they made these statements on the basis of their experience. So this is an attempt to try to understand what they saw. What is it that is fundamental here? What is it that is important here? And how does it relate to our own practical life? All these issues we can nicely talk about on a Sunday morning, especially when it's raining outside. We can sit nice and warm inside and speculate on all these wonderful things. And then we go home to our regular problems and are faced with this problem and this solution and that solution, and the whole matter comes up again. So we long for that nice quiet Sunday morning when we could sit back in our chairs and speculate on the great sameness that pervades everything. Is it like that? Is it something that is good in a theoretical sense, but has really nothing much to do with our daily life, with our daily problems, with our hopes and aspirations? No, it is the very essence of facing those problems. The very essence of facing those problems is to understand what that sameness is. It's not a theoretical thing at all. It's an intensely practical point to be discussed and to be experienced more than discussed. But first, I would like to go through some of these verses, some of these statements by the great people who have experienced these fundamental realities, what they have said, and the profound breadth of their realizations. So, if we go, for instance, to the Isha Upanishad, which is one of the oldest Upanishads, and it's usually, when a list of Upanishads is made, usually the Isha Upanishad, it's one of the shortest, but usually it's listed first. Isha Upanishad has the pride of place among the Upanishads. Not that it is the most fundamental or the most outstanding or the most that it is outdistances the others, but it is given that pride of place because of the succinctness and the precision of its utterances. Isha vasyam idam sarvam. That's the essence of it. Vasyam means it is to be clothed, to be covered. It is, if one wants to study grammatically, it's a future passive participle. I'm sure that doesn't going to make much difference to many people. Nevertheless, that is the grammatical form. Isha vasyam. By the Lord, Isha instrumental case, by the Lord, this is to be covered. What? Sarvam idam. Sarvam is all, idam this. All this is to be covered with the Lord, or to be, actually, vasyam can also mean to be clothed, to be covered as clothing covers. So everything is to be covered with the Lord. In other words, everything is to be understood as being pervaded by that reality that is called Isha, the Lord. What is all of this? Yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Jagatyam, in this jagat, in this world, jagat moves. Whatever moves in this world is to be covered with the Lord. In fact, whatever exists in this world is to be covered. In other words, is to be seen as an embodiment of the Lord. An embodiment of what? Isha. What is that Lord that is being described? This is their experience, that spirit which they called the Lord, God, the infinite, the eternal, is defined in other places in all of these ways, is present in everything. Everything is to be seen as being pervaded by God. Everything is to be covered by the Lord, means everything is to be seen as pervaded by God. Every perception is to be seen as pervaded by God. In the Kena Upanishad, the statement is pratibodha viditam. It is to be, every perception, it is to be seen. This reality is to be seen in every perception. Whatever we perceive is to be seen as covered with God, as taking place within that divine reality. God is to be seen as the essence of everything, as the central reality of everything. Covered, everything is to be covered, to be included in that which we call God. That is the statement. Now, what does it mean in a practical sense? When we look around, all we see are physical objects, all we infer are intellectual object, that is thoughts. God is not seen anywhere, or at least we don't think we're seeing God everywhere, anywhere. What is this entity that's supposed to be everywhere, but is really mostly not seen anywhere? What is that? And what is meant by that? There are other verses about that reality. Again from the Isha Upanishads. Yastu sarvani bhutani atmanyevanu pashyati. That who, pashyati means sees. Whoever sees all beings, bhuta is being, sarva is all. Sarvani bhutani, all beings, atmani, in the Atman. in that spiritual reality, whatever that is. We haven't defined it yet. But this is that reality which is supposed to cover everything, is now being referred to. He who sees all beings in that self, that Atman, that reality, that ultimate existence. Sarva bhuteshu chatmanam cha atmanam, and the Atman in all beings, he who sees that divinity in all beings and all beings in that divinity. Both ways, totally, they're you know, this could be a legal document. Every possible way that you can phrase it is being phrased here. They're making a definite statement and they are not going to tolerate any disagreement. So it's phrased in every possible way. Because of that, seeing the divinity in all beings and all beings within that divine reality, they do not vijagupsati, they do not wish to conceal themselves, they do not wish to, they're not subject to any delusion. So this is what we have to try to understand. These sages, they saw a universal divine principle. That is to say, something divine means it has the divine we emphasize in three ways. Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is, it exists. Chit, it is consciousness itself. Ananda, it is joy itself. That is another definition of what it is we're looking for. The essence of all things, that which is the same in all reality, in all manifestations. So the point is that existence, consciousness, and joy. In other words, it's not a theoretical entity that is nice to know but doesn't have much significance for us personally. But it is something that's filled with joy, filled with fulfillment, filled with satisfaction, and consciousness itself. It is not an inert thing. It's not like a molecule or an atom, an electron, proton, neutron, a quark, or whatever you call it. It's not an object. It is something which is intensely perceptible, intensely enjoyable in the pure sense of pure joy, unmixed with anything of the opposite. Sorrow, no sorrow, it is entirely filled with joy. So what is this? You know, they insist that such a thing exists. They insist that this, not only does this thing exist, but it pervades everything. It is the essence of everything. It is to be seen everywhere and in all beings. All right, so the boss comes to you and accuses you of having done something which you haven't done, and you get terribly mad and angry in so many different ways. You feel hurt. And that too is to be seen as Brahman. Everything that is positive in our lives, everything that is negative, everything that is neutral, that divine reality is to be seen as the essence of all that. And all beings are to be seen within that, and that is to be seen as the essence of all beings. Now, do we experience that? No. We don't experience that. But this is the statement that is made, that, in other words, this is that same-sightedness. On the surface, everything looks different. There are no two faces that are alike, no two psychologies that are alike, no two histories are alike. So what is it that is alike? What is it that is the same? everywhere and among everything. That is the what we're trying to discover. So these statements are made as challenges for us to verify. The idea is not that we should accept them, simply swallow that wholesale, all right, these people have seen it, okay, it's fine, and then we go about our lives in the usual way anyhow. That is not the idea. The idea is that this knowledge and this experience makes a profound difference in our existence. Because right now, everything that we are concerned with is time-bound. Everything that we care about is time-bound. It is bound by time. It's here now, and then at some other time it will disappear, and that which we call we, namely this body and this mind, also will disappear. We know that for sure, because we have no evidence of anybody having had this body longer than, I think the oldest recorded human being is like 130 years old or so. And this earth is 4 billion years or something. So obviously nobody has survived very long on this earth beyond this normal stretch of time. So what is it? Where do we come from and where do we go? What is the essence of all our experience? Is there anything more than what we see here? That is the subject we are dealing with. Is there anything more to our life than what we normally experience? The normal daily run of things. Is there something that we're missing, something that we have not taken into account? And these scriptures all maintain that. And of course, all religions maintain this, that there is something profound here which normally we have not taken into account. And that thing is not subject to the woes that the body and the mind are subject to. Each religion will phrase it in a different way, but the basic message is that there is something here which is not bound by time, but we have not the slightest idea what that is in our normal daily life and encounters. But the way to, or one way which our scriptures approach it is through this idea, this insistence on same-sightedness. We should be able to see that reality the same everywhere, in all perceptions. Every perception, pratibodha viditam, every perception is, in every perception, that reality is to be seen. So in the Bhagavad Gita, there are a number of verses that in chapter 13 that talk about this phenomenon, this consciousness. He who sees the Supreme Lord as existing equally in all beings and as the imperishable among the perishable, the person who has realized this truth, he sees the Supreme Lord as existing equally in all beings and as the imperishable among the perishable. Samam sarveshu bhuteshu, the same in all bhutas, in all beings, Tishtantam Parameshwaram, this Parameshwara, this Supreme Lord, Supreme Reality, give it any name you want. The Supreme Reality, Tishtantam, existing, present participle, standing in, existing in all beings, Vinashya vinashyantam, vinashyatsu, in the perishable, avinashyantam, the imperishable in the perishable. Yah pashyati sapashyati. He who sees that, he really sees. What we see normally is not called sight in this context. What we see normally is just the very surface of things. Even if we're talking, if we try to understand the psychology of people, not only see them on their surface, but also understand their mental constitution, their mental approach, that is not called seeing in this context. He who sees Parameshwara, the Supreme Lord. Now, the Supreme Lord means, what is the characteristic of that Parameshwara? First of all, it is always existing. It has never come into existence and will never go out of existence. It is unchanging. It is that which pervades everything. In other words, the statement is made that there is a reality here which we do not see now, but which we can see. There's a possibility of seeing it. There's a possibility of experiencing it. What we're seeing now is not really seeing at all, because we're only seeing the very, very surface of it. It's like sailing on the surface of the ocean. And you're simply looking at the ocean. Yes, I understand what the ocean is. You don't understand anything. You're just seeing the very surface of something which is in places 35,000 feet deep. How can you say you understand it? You see only the very surface of it. Our life, our normal existence is exactly like that. We look at people, we look at things, we look at events, we pontificate gloriously about, oh, this is very good, very auspicious. No, we should do this, we should do that. We do so many things on this level. Actually, we're only seeing the very surface of this ocean. Only this ocean is infinitely deep. The Pacific Ocean is maximum 35,000 feet deep. But nevertheless, to say that when you have sailed, say even if you've sailed from here over to Asia, and you spend weeks on it, and you say that I have now understood the ocean, you have not understood anything except the very tiniest surface. And sometimes the waves on that surface are huge. I've seen the Atlantic Ocean in a storm, and the waves would be higher than the bridge of the ship, than the control tower of the ship. The waves would be higher than that and crash over the deck. But can I say that I know the ocean? Not in the least. There's an infinite number of realities within that ocean that I have not the slightest knowledge about. So the same thing is when we walk here in this earth. We're looking at people, we're dealing with people, we're living our life in so many different ways. For us to think that we understand life is totally the same as saying, looking at the surface of the ocean, saying we now understand what it is. We have not seen the essence of life. And that is what religion is supposed to, spirituality is supposed to deal with. And how is it that you go down into the depths and see what marvelous things are located in that ocean? In that ocean there are caves, there are animals of such glory and color and shimmering hue that you are absolutely astounded. When we see a little bit of that in some photographs that have been taken, we're amazed at what the ocean contains. Same thing, this life. These people, these knowers of the depths of life, have told us that you only have a very, very shallow idea. We have a great opinion about ourselves, how much we know. Actually, the knowers of that reality, they maintain we have just barely touched the surface of existence. And as we approach that depth, as we approach that reality, as we go deep into this thing which we call life, as we approach this condition that is described in these scriptures, as we're able to see that divine reality that's present in every perception, pratibodha viditam, in every perception, that infinite Lord is to be seen. And these scriptures say this again and again in so many different ways. He who sees all beings in this Atman, in this self, and who sees this Atman in all beings, he feels no hatred for anything because of that realization. When to the person of realization all beings become that very reality, that Atman, that very divine reality, then what delusion, what sorrow can there be for such a seer of oneness? That's the next verse in the Isha Upanishad. Yasmin sarvani bhutani atma abhut vijanataha tatra ko moha kashoka ekatvam anupashyataha. So tatra ko moha, where is delusion? Kashoka, where is sorrow? For the person, the being who sees that oneness. So that is what we're trying to understand. What is that oneness? What is that thing, that sameness that is seen in everything? What is it that we're trying to get to? What is that glory that we're trying to perceive underneath the surface of this life, underneath the surface of existence? In so many verses, the Bhagavad Gita mentions the same thing. This isn't just in one place, in one time. This is again repeated. This is the whole purpose is to urge us to try to follow that. He who sees the Supreme Lord as existing equally in all beings, as the imperishable among the perishable, he truly sees. Since by seeing equally the Lord, who is present alike everywhere, he does not injure the self by the self, therefore he attains the supreme goal. The idea, that sameness idea, this is a profound concept that we have to keep in mind. That underneath this difference, there is that sameness, and that sameness is an infinite reality that does not come into existence, has not come into existence, will not go out of existence. It is the ground of existence. It is the ground, the reality, that which makes which brings the reality within that which changes, gives us that consciousness of the unchanging within the changing. That is what we have to try to find out. How to discover that on the ordinary life that we live, which is really, compared to the truths we're talking about now, is a very pedestrian sort of existence. It deals with material things. There's nothing spiritual. There's nothing. It's only vaguely acceptable to us. How is it that we're able to see? What can we do to really see into the depths of that, of our experience? It's not that we have to go anywhere or do anything. The point is, if we just can see within ourselves that reality, if we can see within every perception that reality, that is the goal that we're trying to achieve. And all spiritual practice is basically meant to do that. It's not just for some simple quietness of mind, some feeling good, feeling peaceful. You know, those things, they're all worthwhile, but that's not really the goal. That's not the essence of what we're looking for. Because all of those things, you feel good for a while, you can also feel the opposite. If you feel peaceful, you can also feel disturbed. It isn't, there's nothing fundamental or, you could say, eternal about that. What we really want is to feel that which will never change, to feel that ground of existence which has never come into existence, never come into being, but is nevertheless the ground of all being and of all existence. We want to feel that which has never come into being and therefore will never decay. Now, normally you ask, well, is there any such thing? We have no proof of any such thing. But all of spiritual practice is to enable us to see that ground of being. Yoga, definition, yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is the calming of the waves of the chitta, of the mind. And when you calm those waves of the mind, what is it that you gain from that? The fact that there is a reality within the mind, which is not the mind, but which manifests through the mind. There's a reality in existence which is not existence, which is not our ordinary existence, but which shines through that. And that has never come into being and will never decay. That is one of the things that's so difficult for us to realize, that there is an entity which has never come into being and will never decay, will never go out of being. That is what is called God. That is, and that is experienceable. It's not that we just have to have faith that it exists and everything will be all right. That might be, maybe just a simple faith in its existence, a reliance on it, everything will be all right. That could be fine. We're not saying that that doesn't happen. But what we want is more than that. What we want is not just the faith that it exists. We want to have the experience of its reality, the experience that it is not just an inert something which we will experience at the end of time. Is something that we can experience right now. So then now we come to the question, how does all this benefit our everyday life? I was saying in the beginning that this, whatever we have, whatever conclusions have been arrived at in spiritual life, should benefit our life right now. should benefit ourselves in our ordinary problems. I mean, the very most ordinary problem and the very most complicated problem, all are seen within that divine reality. That divine reality is the screen on which all these problems and their solutions are seen. So how does that help us? How does this knowledge help us in our regular, ordinary, even the very simplest thing? Should I do this or should I do that? Should I make this decision or should I make that decision? If I base even that just on the ordinary ideas of what is right, what is appropriate, what is proper, that's good. That's fine. I can do that, and that's what we try to do most of the time. But there's another way of approaching even ordinary problems. Within realizing that, as the sages have told us, that reality exists. We have not seen it in its brilliance and in its certainty as the sages may have seen it, but let us take it as an assumption. Let us see if this really exists. What I'm saying is like what Brother Lawrence, the Christian monk from France, said what he felt. He said, if I pick up a straw from the ground, I do it for the love of Jesus, for the love of God. The point is, if you fill yourself with this consciousness that God is real, right now we're so intent on making the statement that God has to be proved first. And therefore, until we get absolute proof, we're not going to believe in anything. We're not going to act upon it. We're not going to take it in as part of our procedures of dealing with daily life. But we can do it the other way. And that is very scientific. You assume that it is true and see what happens. Is what you expect to happen actually happening? That is the question. And this is the experiment which we should perform. Let us assume that all of this is true. Otherwise, to try to realize that sameness everywhere, takes a certain amount of development, and you say, well, I'm not there yet. I'm willing to aim for that, and I will do whatever it takes to try to perceive that, to realize these profound spiritual states, but I'm not there yet. Okay, fine. But nevertheless, you can use these ideas even right now. When a child learns to write, very carefully it may write this letter, that letter, and another letter. And it'll take a long time for it to be able to really write very well. But in the meantime, it may do some scrawling on the chalkboard or on the paper also. Those signs also have a significance. So even right now, if we assume, all right, I haven't proved it, but I will assume that God is real. God means the infinite, the eternal, the all-pervading, the background of everything, the screen upon which this world is projected in my consciousness. Let us assume that that is so. Feeling myself with the idea of the presence of God. Let me tackle a problem and see what happens when I tackle the problem. Frequently what happens is you get a certain mental clarity because of it. Because you're covering yourself with truth. truth as has been discovered by the sages, not only of ancient days, but also of present days. Knowers of Brahman are present even this day. They say that the world is never totally without knowers of Brahman. But we're not there. Nevertheless, if we fill ourselves with the consciousness that God is real and present right now, let us just see. Can I feel the presence of something that might be termed as being what is described as the presence of God? Let us fill ourselves with that idea. Let us feel the presence of God. Now then you say, well, you don't see it. The point is, feeling is much more subtle than seeing. Feeling goes to a great depth. Feeling, you can feel that in a psychological sense, you can feel the presence of God in much more subtly than you can try to see it. When you see it, you may not see it. And when the great souls have seen God as such, they describe it in a very spectacular way. But in a very simple way, each one of us can feel the presence of God. If God is a reality, it should be possible to feel the existence of that reality. It should be possible to feel, even in a very subtle way, it should be possible to feel God's existence. And if not, then there's something terribly wrong with God, not with us. But this is actually what happens. A person like Brother Lawrence, even though he wasn't necessarily in a very high state, when he was picking up a straw from the ground, he felt that he was doing it for the love of Jesus. That he felt that reality to be actually present and being pleased by his act. That is something we can all try. We have a terrible problem, some difficulty has come up, so complicated in so many ways. And then we try intellectually to devise a method of solving this problem. Maybe we try it and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't work. Especially if it doesn't work, then we're all upset. What should we do now? And we immediately try to conceive of a different way of handling the problem. But our mind is confused. Our mind is terribly worried by this problem that has come up. And because it is terribly worried, our decisions are not always very good. Our decisions become tainted by this desperation that we feel. But if instead of that, feeling the presence of God, we attain a certain quietness of mind, we present the problem to God. Okay, this is the problem. What seems to happen not guaranteed, mind you, but what seems to happen is that a certain clarity of mind is generated. And in that clarity of mind, that calmness of mind, ideas come which sound to us as we think of them, yes, this could be a solution. Why don't I try it? In other words, the idea of the presence of God everywhere, that same-sightedness which we were talking about, is something that can be used in our day-to-day lives. We're taking it on the assurance of those people who have experienced it and expressed their assurance in the scriptures. Okay, let us try it. That's a very scientific way. You try it as an assumption, and then if it doesn't bear out, okay, you've tried it, you've proved that it's not true. But what should be tried is when we resign ourselves to God in this way, in the midst of this problem, a certain clarity of mind. You can blame it on clarity of mind, not on the grace of God if you want. That's okay. Anyway, something happens that tells us that we have approached closer to the reality of things. Our mind has become clearer. And in that clarity of mind, some solutions manifest themselves. At least not guaranteed that these solutions are going to be really the final solutions of the particular problem we have. But the point is, an opening is found, a way is found for us to pursue and go into the solution of the particular problem of the moment. So the fact that this same-sightedness, that we should see the presence of God everywhere, in everything, under all circumstances, has very practical consequences. And when you try it, if you find that it works, it fills one with great joy. That is the ananda aspect, the bliss aspect. That any step, you take one little step toward the infinite and the eternal by assuming its existence in our daily practical life. And it fills one with so much joy that one is very much tempted to continue. So these are the practical aspects of this particular subject, seeing the one within the many. Otherwise we might think, well, this is just a theoretical question. I see God in everything, but what does it have to do with my daily problems? No, it has everything to do with our daily problems. Because God, the infinite, the eternal, is manifesting in all these different ways. And to say that everything depends on our own intelligence, that we have to raise ourselves up by our own bootstraps, so to speak, is found in that case to be a very inadequate approach to our problems. That bringing this idea of Brahman, of the eternal, the infinite, into everyday life is a very powerful, convincing experiment for us that such a thing does exist. Not only does it exist, but it is a direct prime, it can be a direct help to us, even in a very practical way. So this is it's not just a question, oh yes, the infinite, the eternal, it's something that's satisfying to talk about. It's something that fulfills our intellectual hope of having a very convincing view of the universe. But we live our lives, our ordinary lives, in our own way, and this is relegated to some high intellectual realm where we consider it. No, these things have something very important to do with our daily life. Our daily problems can be brought under this umbrella. Even the simplest of our daily problems can be brought under this umbrella to fill ourselves with the idea that God is present within. You say it's only an idea. Yes, it's only an idea, but it makes a lot of difference in our whole mental attitude, our whole mental outlook. Thank you.